All right, today I want to go over how we can use CSS on our website and kind of take a break from some of the HTML. I feel like we know enough HTML that we really need to start learning how to style it, so that way our layouts kind of come together and we're not looking at just terrible looking default browser styles with our markup. So throughout the courses, we're using our CSS alongside our HTML. Things are just going to look a lot nicer. I'm primarily a front-end developer, so I don't really feel good about showing any more markup until we can kind of start making this layout look a little nicer. But before we can do that, we need to learn the basics of CSS. So I thought this would be a fun lesson to kind of jump right into that and just start covering it, because again, as these lessons go on, it'll get a little bit more difficult. So we need to kind of start learning some of the stuff. So we've got our CSS file. We learned in a previous video how to link that, and that's where our styles will go. So we're going to go right into this file. So where do we start? How do we even begin? One resource that I highly suggest you use to start learning is called codecademy.com. It's free to sign up and get started with some of their beginner tutorials and courses. It's just a great way to kind of get some interactive typing and see how things work. I feel like they've done a really good job at that. So that's one good resource to begin and kind of get a feel for if this is even something you want to do. So with that said, let me teach you where I would begin to learn CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and there's a reason why it's mentioned or named Cascade, because all the styles kind of flow down the page. So let's add some markup here. And see that this is red. We want to style this red text, right? So how do we do that? Well, we've got our P element, and it's inside of our main, inside of our body. We can target just about anything. We can target these elements. So why don't we target this P element? So in our CSS, we write P, and we've got some brackets, and this is what we call a selector, right? We are selecting this P tag, and we want to give it some styles. Now, CSS is pretty deep. There's so many styles to remember and learn. And yes, I know it's overwhelming, but again, we're just starting out, so let's take it really slow. Some things that we can do. We can change font size. We can change color. We can change the background color. We can give a font weight to text. There's many things we can do, but so we can see something visual. Let's start with the background color, and let's give the background color red. Let's refresh this, see what happens. All right, this is red. We can see that it's got a background color. If we right-click and inspect that, here we go. We can see that our P element right here in our custom.css on line 1, P, we've got a background color red. Now it's cool here in our little inspector, we can select this color and we can change it right here and get an automatic preview of what color we want. We can also use this little eyedropper tool. It's what's so nice about Chrome, and go and select colors that are on the site, so that way we match exactly what's there if we wanted to pick colors out that way. So that's pretty nifty. That's background color, right? We can also type right in here. We don't even have to type right in our code editor. We can just start adding CSS. Now, as we start typing, look right here, we can see all different types of CSS, what we call properties, right? So this is a property, and then a colon, and then we also have what's called a value. So we have this property value pair, if you will. Oh, and trying to explain and type at the same time. So we need to give that a value. So this is a proper value, white. So first things first, right? Like how do you know what are you typing here? Like, where are you getting all this information, right? How did you know it was background color instead of background? Like, how did you know that it was just color to change the text? That was one thing that always hung me up. I'd see people writing CSS when I started out. I'm like, well, where are you getting this list of information from? I don't understand that. You're just pulling it out of thin air. No, there are many different properties. One excellent resource that I highly recommend that I wish I knew about early on, it's called cssreference.io. This is great. You can see right here it says search 129 CSS properties. What I'd like to do as part of these video series is we're going to go through every single one of these and explain it and use it and play with it and really get to know CSS. I would say I probably know all of these just from all the years of writing CSS. However, there are a few that I don't typically use all that often. Or some that I've used but maybe don't know as well as others. So I think it's always going to be a continual learning process. And what's really cool about CSS is it's growing and evolving. So we're going to have new properties that come up, and some work great in some browsers and some don't. So we're going to learn about that too. So again, it's a very simple topic with a lot of depth. And so it's easy for a beginner to maybe think they know these things, but then maybe don't use them correctly. So I want to try to help alleviate some of that confusion. So again, that's one great resource to go and look for that. I just want to kind of show you how you can kind of start to manipulate things. So now, if I refresh the page, all these changes, they're going to go away. Okay. This just happens more instantly, so you can kind of play with things if we want those changes to be saved. So every time we refresh the page, it needs to be in the file so it can load it up. So we've got our background color red here. We'll put a color white. Again, when we are writing our properties in our code editor, it'll start to hint. Like if I start to type display, it'll know that, oh, yep, display, that's one of them, right? So that's another thing that's nice by using a code editor that kind of knows what is in the language. You can kind of pick and learn from there as you're exploring. Mostly if you just think like, hey, yeah, I would love to make this text bigger. If you just searched in Google, how to make text bigger with CSS, I'm sure you would find, oh yeah, it's the font size property. Let's look at that. There's font size, and then we can give it a value. Say this time we'll do 25 pixels or something. You can see how that increases the font size. So all these things will come over time as we're learning, right? Why don't we learn really quickly about where CSS can get a little confusing. So let's say we have another P element. This one's going to be blue. We have what's called these attributes of class, right? Okay, so this one's red, this one's blue. Well, why is this one have the red background? Well, because it has our paragraph, right? In our paragraph, we've said all paragraph tags. Select them all and give them all these properties. We can come over here and uncheck them and see what happens. So back here, if we wanted to target that blue one, right? We've got a class of blue. So how do we get that class in CSS? The way we do that is with a dot. And in this case, our editor already knows, hey, it looks like there's a class in our project, dot blue. And maybe we want the background color to be blue. Let's see what happens. All right, it's blue. Well, that's cool, but why did that work exactly? Well, blue class, it might have what we call specificity, which is it has a higher importance over, say, another selector. And we'll dive deeper into that, but essentially, what if we put this instead of blue? What if we had this as just a p tag? What do you think is going to happen? Well, they're both blue. Well, I don't understand what happened here. Well, that's the cascade part that we talked about earlier with CSS. So anything further down in our style sheet, think of this as like a waterfall, right? The water starts up here, it starts falling down the line 1, 2, 3. So it gets all that, but then by the time we get down here in our waterfall, this is the last one to get rendered out. So it's going to have a higher priority and overwrite the previous styles. And we can see that here with this line. So we see here that this comes first. That means whatever happens here is first. So if we were to write a font size here of like 12 pixels, it'll change them all. It'll overwrite the one that was written first. It's kind of interesting. So I know that can get really confusing quickly, and even with classes, right? What's going to take more priority? What if I wrote p.blue? Okay, so this one, again, since it comes after, it's going to have that priority. What happens if we do this? Set that here. We're going to move this up above. Now what do we think is going to happen? Oh, interesting. Well, I thought you said earlier that it's a cascade, like a waterfall, but this came first, and it's still overriding this red one. Explain to me that. Well, that's kind of interesting. Well, what's happening here, we have what's called this specificity. And if we see right here what I'm highlighting, we've got a 0, 1, 0, and this one, we've got a 0, 0, 1. Okay, so that is an order, right? So the 1, that 0, 1, 0, that has a higher order or importance, whereas this one has a 0, 0, 1. Why don't we take a break for now, and I'm going to work on kind of more how that important works in another lesson, and kind of get our some better examples for you, so that way we're not just winging this, because I feel like this is a really important thing. And even though I know how this works, I am kind of new to explaining this to somebody, especially since this is a video and I'm not really talking to somebody, so you can't really answer questions back and forth unless maybe you do that in the comments. But let's take a break. We'll pick this up in the next video. All righty.